Hello and welcome to Chapter 7, Outlining Your Speech. Let's get you going as soon as possible. A lot goes on when it comes to outlining your speech. It is paramount that you do it correctly so that way it can help you to succeed in actually presenting your speech, because clearly there is more to life than just a presentation. Or I should say, there's more to it than just presenting. When you hear a very good public speaker, his or her comments flow from one point to the next as if they were spontaneous and part of an elegant flow, when in fact that really is not the case. Public speaking concerns oral delivery, and outlining is actually very crucial. You will find through your informative as well as your persuasive speech that outlining your speech is actually going to be very paramount. It organizes your thoughts, it organizes all the information that you gather, and every minute thing that you put into your outline is going to be paramount when you deliver and transfer it over to a delivery. So that is something that you really need to seriously think about as you move forward and start outlining your speech. Developing a speech outline can ensure that you have identified your main points clearly and arrange them in a way that will help you impress your meaning on the minds of audience members. When an audience listens to an actual speech, they are often mentally placing together the outline that you prepared in their heads. It's as if you're taking them through your thoughts very strategically and very thought provoking. Listeners literally demand coherence. They demand clarity and transparency. They want things to be clear. They don't want to think about what you have to say or be questioning what you have to say. Your audience does not want to have to organize your ideas in their head. That is your job. And when you think about it, especially after you begin to organize your speech, it's really not a major task. Now, when you get into informative and persuasive speakings, there's more to outlining your speech than just a keyword outline. You have to organize strategically. You think of it as outlining your thoughts. Think of it that way. When you organize, you are establishing relationship amongst your ideas. You know, one main point is one idea, main point two is another idea, and you have all these small little points in between that you're organizing and you're connecting together very strategically. So what's the purpose of a preparation outline, you ask? Let me tell you. An outline is usually written in the form of a list and divided into headings and subheadings that distinguish your main points and your supporting points. So when you go back into your ebook on page 144, it talks about it. And the purpose of an outline, however, is to determine a hierarchy among the speech points. You know, what's most important, and then what's the second most important thing, and then the third main point. It's a matter of importance of how you want to talk about it. Here is an example of outlining your speech. Big point one, another big point, and then another big point, your final big point. And those are actually, that has nothing to do, by the way, of your introduction as well as your conclusion. And in those are all of your smaller points and your subpoints. And those are things that are also considered part of organizing, I should say, strategically. Your standard speech outline kind of looks like this on page 145. Before you rock and roll, you need to learn your three chords. And these are your three chords. Think of it that way. Now, your opening sentence isn't necessarily your transitional statement that takes you from one point to the other. That's another thing that has to be put into your outline, and that is something that we will talk about in a later chapter. Your main points, it depends on what you have to say and how much you have to say. You average about 3 main points. That's something that you have to keep that in mind. And sometimes your presentation only needs 2. Like, you know, you have one major one and then you counter it with another major one and call it a day. Sometimes you may need more, but you average out about 3. And again, it doesn't include your introduction as well as your conclusion. So when you think about it, you have approximately, on average, 5 points in your entire outline. You have your introduction, you have 3 main points. I can't do this properly. And then you have your conclusion. And so you, in between all of them, these little slots, if you will, those are your transitional phrases that'll take you from one main point to the other, however you want to do it. I know I'm kind of being silly, but at least it gives you some sort of an idea, some sort of a visual as to how to do that. Each main point should actually be independent and not rely on another point, which means that if you take out a point, the other two can stand, or that should just stand on its own. They are not reliant on one another. If anything, they enhance each other, but that's as far as it goes. Balance your time from one main point to the other. Don't give one main point 5 minutes and the other one 2 minutes. I put down here as 10, and I have seen that before, and it's very exhausting because when you marinate and when you talk too much about one thing, you tend to lose your audience. And the fact that you put so much effort into one, you're not putting enough balance into the rest. From that point, the book talks about organizing your supporting materials as well. Please do not misplace them. You have a place to put them just as strategically to make your main points clear. And again, I cannot stress enough, clear, concise, and transparent. You need to remember these 3 words as you continue to develop your outline. From your preparation speech, you should start plotting your ideas for your speech in their standard speech outline. You fill in the actual words you want to say, and you begin to alter the organization that best fits your needs and purposes. You can start changing things up. You can even take out, you can add in, you can alter the organization to actually fit the purpose. You may start with, a topical organizational speech and then turn into a chronological. And then, of course, you add your transitions. For your preparation outline, you've got the beginning stages, and then it goes into more of a standard. It has more detail in it. At the end of your outline, it's going to be a full sentence outline. And then you can transition that into your note cards and your cue cards. Now, how you present is up to you and how comfortable. You can, and that depends on your outline. You can present with your preparation speech, which is on page 149. Throw your full sentences even onto your note cards, or reduce and even more and just a few talking points if that's something that you feel more comfortable with. And that's on page 155. The book states a speaking outline is for extemporaneous speaking. And would you agree on that? And the reason why that question is posed to you is because typically speaking, extemporaneous is conversational, but how many of us can actually talk and have a conversation for 3 to 5 minutes on a topic that is not necessarily a story that we fully own? We're just informing you. Think of it that way. So the full sentence outline that you break down and you put into your note cards typically can, once you start memorizing and once you start knowing your speech a little bit more, then you start to sound more extemporaneous. Then you start to sound more conversational. In your note cards, put your full sentences on there. Highlight, bold certain sentences or words, so that way when you have to emphasize on a word or sentence or a stat, it shows up on your note card. You know how to present it. Put like arrows as to when to go to your next cue card, when to go to your next point, and even in your note cards, insert where you start flipping your visual slides, because visual aids are also in order. So you may even want to put that in your outline. That is entirely up to you. That's optional. I've seen that happen. It's not a bad thing. Think of it that way. And of course, you put your transitional phrases that will take you and will take the audience from one point to another. So you can first start skeletal, get more detailed, finish it off, and then transform it all into your note cards. That is your best bet when you begin to present your speeches. Here are some ways that you can organize your speech. There is a chronological order, just main point one, main point two, and main point three. It's very, very self-explanatory. Spatial is following a directional pattern. It's proceeds from top to bottom, left to right, inside and out, east to west, or some other routes. The best spatial speech that comes to mind for me is when someone did an informational speech about Greenfield Village, and they had their visual aids to tote with it as well. And what they ended up doing, and I thought it was fantastic, is it took me through some sort of space and some sort of a direction as to every part of the Henry Ford Village and Greenfield Village that was there. You know, it definitely was educational, and they had the visual aids to enhance the spatial order that she told. Problem solution is mostly not an informational, but definitely a persuasive order. You divide it into two main parts. You have your first one shows the existence of the seriousness of the problem, and your second main point is a workable solution to the problem. And again, problem solution order is mostly done for a persuasive speech. Another outline to use is topical. You divide the speech topic into subtopics, and each of them becomes a main point in your speech. Here is what is called Lady Liberty. It is a very great speech. Pay more attention to how it is organized, and then you can go from there.
If you've ever been to New York, you've probably seen it. I used to see it almost every day growing up on Staten Island in New York Harbor. And even though its skin has turned green with age, it remains vibrant. I'm talking, of course, about the Statue of Liberty. This 220 tons of copper and iron is a powerful symbol of our country. Now, America isn't perfect, and we sometimes fall short of our ideals, but the Statue of Liberty remains a part of our lives. We see it all the time in movies, on television, and in advertisements. The statue has become so familiar that we sometimes don't think about it, but we should. As Neil Kotler, an historian at the Smithsonian Institute, says, the Statue of Liberty is a monument of breathtaking proportions. I've been fascinated with the Statue of Liberty ever since I was a kid, but I never knew just how amazing it is until I started researching it for this speech. This morning, I'd like to tell you a bit about its symbolism, its history, and its architecture. By the end, I hope you'll understand why this familiar structure is a modern marvel. Let's start with its symbolism, moving from the top of the statue to the bottom. At the top is the statue's most famous symbol, the torch. Ever since the statue was built, the torch has been a beacon to immigrants. It's the torch that prompted the poet Emma Lazarus to pen the famous lines that are inscribed on the pedestal of the statue. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Down from the torch is the Statue of Liberty's crown. Coming out from the crown are 7 rays, one for each continent. As the National Park Service explains on its Statue of Liberty website, these rays symbolize the importance of liberty around the world. Less famous than the crown and the torch are the chains at the foot of the Statue of Liberty. As you can see here, the chains are broken. National Geographic magazine explains that the broken chains represent the abolition of slavery and the Union's victory in the U.S. Civil War, which ended not long before the statue was built. As we shall see next, the symbolism of the statue takes on added significance when we take a look at its history. Historian Edward Berenson, author of The Statue of Liberty, A Transatlantic Story, explains how the statue was created. At a dinner party in France in 1865, 2 men, Edouard de Laboulaye and Frederic Bartholdi, came up with the idea of building a statue for the United States. Laboulaye was an expert on American politics and wanted to commemorate the end of slavery. Bartholdi was a brilliant young sculptor who envisioned a colossal monument he called Liberty Enlightening the World. Construction of the statue began in 1876 and was completed 10 years later. All the building was done in France. You can see in this photo what the statue looked like with the buildings of Paris in the background. After the statue was finished, it was taken down, as you can see here, put in boxes, and shipped to New York, where it was reconstructed. When the statue was unveiled in New York, more than 1 million people flocked to the harbor to see it. Shown in this painting, the celebration was one of the biggest in American history. Liberty enlightening the world had finally found its permanent home. Today we take the Statue of Liberty for granted, but it was considered an architectural marvel when it was built. If you look at the statue from the outside, it looks solid, like it's made completely of stone, but looks can be deceiving. The statue's exterior is not made of stone, but of copper, and it's only 2.4 millimeters thick. Not much thicker than this penny. Yet despite its thin copper skin, the statue stands 151 feet tall and towers 305 feet above the water, if you include the pedestal. Think about the wind and the weather that have beaten against it for 130 years. The thin copper skin wouldn't be able to survive without something really strong underneath. So what is underneath? As represented in this slide, there's an iron skeleton underneath the copper skin. Darcy Grigsby, author of the 2012 book Colossal, explains that the skeleton is made of a 92-foot tall pylon that is stuck deep in the stone pedestal. The skeleton has flat metal bars that connect the copper skin to the pylon. These bars work like springs. They provide the strength and flexibility that allow the Statue of Liberty to survive the harsh weather of New York Harbor. If the interior design of the Statue of Liberty reminds you at all of this structure, that's because it was created by the same man who would later build the Eiffel Tower. You can definitely see similarities between the open structure of the Eiffel Tower and the engineering principles employed in the interior design of the Statue of Liberty. Architectural historian Yasmin Sabina Khan says in her 2010 book, Enlightening the World, that the statue's design was such a stunning technical achievement that people referred to it at the time as the eighth wonder of the world. In conclusion, I hope I've shown you some of the reasons why the Statue of Liberty remains a wonder of the world. Its symbolism, history, and architecture make this 220 tons of copper and iron a modern marvel. So the next time you're in New York City, the next time you see the statue on television, in movies, in magazines, just remember, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
So you just witnessed the informative speech of Lady Liberty. If you notice, there was a lot that was going on, but all in a very organized manner. You had a beginning, a middle, and an end. You had an introduction, 3 main points, as well as a conclusion that encompasses a full-blown outline. He technically, combined 2 different speech patterns together. He combined a chronological one as well as the organizational pattern of topical, kind of the spatial and taking you through things. He used stats, figures, examples, narratives, all sorts of testimony as well as logical reasoning and supported material. So a lot to take in for an informative speech, but if you notice, it all came together very nicely. So what type of pattern arrangement is this? The importance of playing sports has grown over time. Today, I'm going to lay down 3 points and let you know how they correlate. In the past, how the Olympics started. In the present, how it's valued as education and a very important part of one's life. And my third point, in the future, how it's going to be. So you come up with or think about what type of arrangement is this? Is it a chronological one? Is it a spatial one? Or is it a topical one? Past, present, and future. Examples of outlines to inform my audience about the achievements of Josephine Baker. I believe I took this out of the ebook. As an entertainer, she captivated audiences in Europe and America. As a spy, she gathered information on Nazi activities in France during World War II. And the third main point is, as a civil rights activist, Baker worked for racial equality on a variety of fronts. That is basically a chronological. It was just 3 points in no particular order, or I should say beginning, middle, end. So think of it that way. Your outline of your speech is basically a blueprint, and it states a very specific purpose. You identify the central idea. You label the intro, the body, as well as the conclusion. This is much for you as it is for your presentation and how you are in front of your audience. Try and use consistent patterns of symbolism and indentation. And what you always need to remember is, do not forget your transitions. So I hope you understood a little bit more when it came to outlining your speech. Again, it is very imperative that you start small and then get bigger and then transition that into note cards, and from that point forward to use it in terms of presenting your speech. You will find that if you are consistent and use your full sentence outline, that you will have a much better outcome when it comes to actually physically presenting your speech. That's it for chapter 7. I hope you learned a lot. And if not, once again, go back to your ebook, because it does get into great detail when it comes to your speech. Thank you.